Hello and welcome to the Pétanque Show with me, David Plumoff. Today we welcome Pétanque England Vice President and not forgetting Chiltern player, Martin Hughes. Hi Martin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello Hoff, how are you mate? Let me just say before we start this, I like what you're doing mate. It's a great initiative. I think using new technology to sort of spread the message, I mean obviously you know how much I believe in streaming when we're doing streaming games either at home and abroad, but this sort of stuff and discussion is all good because it allows us to talk about things that are often difficult to sort of run through in written form. You know, I mean, sometimes we have these exchanges on Facebook, but it's always better when you're actually talking things through, I think. So all power to your elbow, mate, and I hope you can expand this further and get more people involved, you know?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. So far, I'm averaging about 1,700 engagements and about 1,200 views on each video. So it's going well, to be honest. So
absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, mate. I mean, you know, one of the things that was quite exciting about our national titles weekend this year was, you know, the thousands of people that watched those videos of our players performing. And one of the most interesting things was you know, when we had some of our juniors playing, first time they've ever been on camera, I think on one of those games that was streamed, there was like 12,000 views of that. So it's just very good for us to spread the message as well, you know. So
yeah, absolutely, getting it out there. And I've set up a YouTube page, the Pétanque Show, basically. And although I haven't advertised that yet, I will put them on there as well to try and maybe reach a broader audience. But it's going to be difficult to do that. But at least it's out there. That's all I can say.
All good, mate. I mean, let's just use technology to the maximum to spread the message. Because the more we spread the message, the more people are going to be interested, attracted into the sport. Yeah. That's very important for us for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's get going with the show anyway, Martin. I appreciate that, by the way.
I mean it, mate. I mean it. I'm not just saying it. I mean it sincerely. I think it's good work, mate. Well done.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So let's start then by asking you to tell us a bit about your pétanque journey and your involvement within the sport.
Journey, eh? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Well, like most people, I think, and this is the importance of the grassroots of our sport, is that, you know, I started playing this game because I turned up down a pub one day, probably in the early 90s. My ex-father-in-law unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he was one of the sort of pioneers of the sport in England, and he was one of the sort of prime movers behind creating Chiltern region, actually. And he just said, look, why don't you come down the pub? I've got this game we play called Pétanque. And at the time, like most people, you never heard of it, have you? You know, and I was completely new to it. I don't know how you got involved, Hoff, yourself. Maybe you can tell us in a minute. But you know, I turned up down the pub and then started playing. I didn't really do it beyond sort of just a recreational thing with him for quite a few years. I met a lot of people then, you know, in those days it was, you know, we're talking about times when people like Matt Everston were teenagers, you know. And then, funnily enough, he said, why don't we all go to Belgium and play? And we took a great big party over there. That was the first time I played pétanque internationally in the mid-90s. And we went over there and had an absolutely brilliant time, which, funnily enough, in you guys, I've kept going through playing in Holland for the last 25 years, every spring, although this bloody virus stopped it, you know, last year. And then it wasn't really until the sort of turn of the century, you know, the beginning of the 2000s, if you like, that I got a little bit more involved, joined a club, started playing league, and then eventually ended up qualifying for the region. In fact, the first time I played for Chiltern region inter regionals, we won it, and that was the first time we've won it, I think, in about 25 years. So that was quite a stroke of luck. Might have been the fact that I was one of those at the time who was saying, look, boys, we've got to stop drinking, you know, because there was too much of a drinking culture going on in those days. People, you know, people can enjoy the sport and they treat that sort of weekend as a fun thing. But, you know, the reality is you drink too much, you're not going to win, are you? Anyway, beyond that, I sort of started playing a bit more, played a bit nationally. Played with you, didn't I, in the Home Nations on a few occasions, or once with you and others, and qualified for that. And obviously continued to play inter-regionals, and And then I suppose the biggest thing I've achieved playing wise is won the Champion of Champions triples with Sean and Reese. That was a great occasion. I really enjoyed playing with those boys at the time. And of course, aside from that, I've obviously been doing coaching. I've coached internationally twice, European singles and also World Women's as a coach, and also coached a couple of teams in other European competitions as well, where we've done pretty well. And then 5 years ago, I joined the board. That's the sort of that's the journey, I suppose. And I've been largely since then responsible for trying to develop our international playing and seeing if we can improve at that level, at the elite level, which no doubt we'll come to discussing a bit later.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's great to hear. So you've definitely like gone up the ranks, haven't you? I suppose. Was your goal always to be on the board? Was it something that you always thought about, being vice president or president?
To be honest, no. But sometimes, you know, I for a number of years before joining the board, you know, like everybody does, you know, you express your opinions about the future of the sport, and you know, sometimes you're critical, and I've always hoped that I've been, you know, had constructive criticism. But there comes a point where you think, well, I should really, if I've got these views and I keep saying these things and I have these certain beliefs about what we should be doing, then maybe I should actually step up and get involved, you know. I mean, I have, to be honest, Hoff, done quite a lot of work with charities over the years. I've sat on the boards of national charities, so I'm used to sort of operating in that sort of environment, you know, and the responsibilities of, you know, sitting at the top of an organisation, because there are quite a few responsibilities associated with it, particularly now that we're all directors of Pétanque England Limited, you know. We have directors' roles and responsibilities, and particularly in relation to finance and stuff like that. So that's become more important, I think, for everybody, you know, those responsibilities. But I didn't particularly set out to become a member of the board. And one of the things that's sort of scuppered, really, I have to say, is it's affected, you know, the time that I've got to play, and in some instances whether I can play or not, because obviously I'm involved in issues around selecting teams. And, you know, it was put to me a couple of years ago that it was probably not the right thing to turn up to rankings competitions and play, you know. So I haven't been able to do that so much, which is, I suppose, comes with the territory. But
you were looking to play this year, weren't you, for the interregionals?
Yeah, I am actually. Yeah, I've got a great team actually. I'm playing with Steve Zimmerman and Emma Coggins. I'm quite looking forward to that because I've not played since 2017. So that should be fun. Hopefully we can have that into regionals later in the year, but no doubt we might talk about that a bit later.
Yeah, definitely. So should we get on with the Q&A? People have been sending in their questions. Yeah. So I'm going to go through them as they've been written. So you just answer them how you want to answer them. If we go off on a tangent, we go off a tangent, but we'll talk about them. Let's start with the first one. The first question is, with the current restrictions due to COVID, would you say April for the beginning of the rankings is a bit optimistic for a starting point?
I think it is optimistic, mate. Yeah, it is at the moment, because I mean, I live in northeast London, and, you know, like many people in this part of the world, in London and particularly out in Kent at the moment, down to the south coast, even south of the river, you know, we got really bad levels of infection. And at the moment there's a lot of ifs and buts, isn't there, about, you know, how well is this vaccine going to work? You know, how's that all going to play out? I mean, one of the concerns I've got about holding national events is that we don't want to be in a situation, particularly if we go back to tiered restrictions, where players can't travel.
Yeah,
you know, it's going to be no good to us at all. That sort of outcome. So we had a discussion actually the other night amongst members of the board about how we're actually looking at that calendar again, to be honest, Hoff, you know, and seeing about how we might re-engineer it. But at the moment, I think March is really out of the question. You might have seen on Facebook that Clive, our president's just indicated to our veteran players that the qualifiers that were set for that month are not going to take place. At the moment, April is still sort of there, but I mean, I think we're going to have to see what's going to happen there. The one thing I will say, and I give this guarantee to everybody, is that, you know, when we do make decisions about that calendar and whether we're going to rejig it, we're going to communicate that as soon as possible. What we don't want to do is make decisions too early, okay? Because the last thing we want to do is a situation where our sport's not functioning and other grassroots sports are functioning, and everybody's going to say to us, well, why aren't we functioning? You know, the reality is we're an outdoor sport, okay? And, you know, the risk of infection, I've said this many, many times to people, well, the risk of infection outside is much, much lower. I mean, I know we've got more risk with this new variant, but it's much lower. And that's been proved. My son plays football every week and was up until the recent lockdown. And, you know, there's been no incidences in that contact sport in his team, playing every week. There's been no incidences of COVID infection. And, you know, we're a sport that we can keep our distance. So with a bit of luck, if things start moving in the right direction, we can get up and playing again. And I think we proved last year with the titles that we can actually do that safely and have a good time, you know. So let's say that March is definitely out, right? But April, let's not quite write it off now, but let's actually think about how we re-engineer the season if it was to start a little bit later.
Absolutely. Good answer. Good answer. I think everyone's happy with that answer as well. So on to the next question. Do you believe the membership money paid in 2020 should have been reimbursed? And also, if 2021 is also restricted due to COVID, which we know at the moment it is, should there be a discount or a refund to members? Okay,
well, the first thing to say is that the board last year did offer a refund, right?
Yeah.
That was offered to everybody, and there were, I can't remember the actual numbers because I rely on other colleagues to run the finances, like our treasurer. He's got his eye on the ball all the time, and is very, very good at his job, to be honest. Well, not to be honest, it's a fact. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think maybe 60, 70, 80 maybe asked for that refund out of everybody that was offered it. So that wasn't a massive take-up, and I think a lot of people were prepared to say, well, look, I know that, you know, we've not been able to do much this year, but I want to sort of support the sport. At the moment, the board is actually going to be considering what it might do with regard to 2021. I think there's two things we should look at as members of PE, right? In the first instance, obviously, I don't criticise anybody that just looks at it from the point of view of what do I get out of this membership, okay? What am I getting? You know, and if we're not playing, you know, I can understand why people are saying, well, I don't feel like I'm getting too much, you know, value for money here. But at the moment, of course, you know, we could have quite an active season still, even though we might lose a month or two at the beginning of it. So I'm hopeful that the people will see that value for money. The reality is as well, though, you know, is when you belong to organisations like PE, it's a bit like me. I belong to various like museums and, you know, exhibition places. I might not even visit them in a year, to be honest, but I'm a member because I want to support them because that's what they're doing. So there is, and I've seen a lot of people say this, largely on Facebook, I have to say, but where members are saying, look, you know, I realise I might not be getting so much out of it personally, but I want to continue supporting it because I want to support the sport, and I want the sport to be in a strong position when it gets going again, you know, post-COVID. So I think there's a couple of considerations, but I just want to emphasise, I don't criticise anybody who look at that, right, and think, well, maybe I'm not getting much for it at the moment, and maybe I'll start paying when I can see the sport up and running again. I don't criticise people for that, but I will say to people, you know, can you think about the bigger picture as well? Because the bigger picture is important, you know. The French, by the way, just on the final point on this, the French have issued a sort of a message to all their clubs, and they're using words like civic duty. It's your civic duty to pay up, you know, because we need you to pay up. I'm not quite sure I would go that far, but I think they are indicating something here about, you know, let's think about the bigger picture and trying to make sure the sport's supported, you know.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that last bit. So moving on then, question 3 is, in 2018, Pétanque England was vastly over budget, but this was ignored and overspent even more in 2019. Does Pétanque England think it's okay to be frivolous with the membership's money?
Well, no one's frivolous with anybody's money, and you know, when you look at the expenditure that we've made over the last few years, ever since I've been on the board, you know, I can honestly say, you know, that the money was spent in furtherance of the sport. You know, no one here is getting rich on PE. You know, it's money that is directed towards the furtherance of, you know, our game. Now, it's true that I can't remember the exact figures, but, you know, put them together, I think in the 2 years, 2018, 2019, we ended up overspending by about 20,000. Okay. Now that money doesn't mean that we're in debt, as some people have sort of said. It meant that we had to go into reserves that we had to actually make sure that the books balanced. Now, the problem that we've had, I think, is a lot of the additional costs, not all of them, but quite a few of them, have been related to the massive expansion of the international playing program, you know, because if you look at it, we've you know, in the good old days, we used to basically send our men and women to triples tournaments, right? Now we've got our under 23s, which is gender split, male and female. We've now got our youth, which is gender split, male and female. We've got our veterans as well, although that is only every other year, but that's still in the year that it falls, an expense that falls upon us. And of course, you know, the other thing that people need to bear in mind with that international spending, of course, is that around about 60% of it is directed towards our under 23s. I don't know whether people are aware of that, but, you know, we have a commitment to support young players and make sure that they're developed and given opportunities. Okay. What's happened this year, and I think it's very important for everybody to understand this, and I don't want to overstate this, but I can't tell you how many hours have been spent amongst board members trying to get the budget right for this year. Okay. We've just been through that process. We completed it just before Christmas, and we've arrived at a balanced budget, a budget where we feel that, you know, we're not going to end up in a deficit situation. But of course, you know, I'm saying that now, it does depend on members renewing, but it also, on the other side of it, depends on the expenditure, because there may be things, and no doubt we'll come to this in a minute, that we're planning to do this year that we won't be able to do because of COVID. So that will then balance itself out. Our commitment is to make sure that we get a balanced budget going forward. That's what we're about. Okay.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Good to hear. Okay, moving on then to question 4. Do you think kit or teamwear should be a compulsory part of Pétanque to help with the image and the promotion of the sport?
I think at the higher levels, I think it's always good to see people in matching kit and professional looking. You know, as Matt Everson always used to say, you know, if you look good, feel good, you play good. You know, as well. It's not just about image; it's about, you know, the team functioning together as well. I think it is quite important, but I have to say I've never been someone who gets, you know, overly precious about it. You know, I'm probably upsetting a few of our umpires, you know, who do look at that quite rightly because they're told to by the organisation. It depends on the level, mate. You know, I think I don't think we should be too strict on it, but I have to say, you know, depending on what level you're at, but I do like to see it myself, and I've always myself, even when I played like in regional teams, we've always attempted to, even in our qualifiers, you know, have the same kit and everything like that. I think it should be a thing of pride, actually. You know,
yeah.
It's like when you guys, you know, playing in Baldock Town. You know, when I've been abroad supporting Baldock Town in the Euro Cup, the international stage of it, you know, you do feel really great when you see the team all together in the matching kit and sort of together and getting ready to compete. I think it's a great morale thing as well, actually. So the more we can do it, the better. You know. By the way, just to let you know, we're in the process of doing a deal with Macron on our international kit going forward. Everybody looking the same, wearing the same kit. And one of the things that we're looking to do with that, just as a matter of interest, is we're going to probably have an online shop where people can also buy the replica kit as well, because it does look very smart, and I'll be showing very shortly what that looks like.
Oh, great.
That's another opportunity for people to wear some nice kit, you know.
Yeah, just to have my opinion on this, just a brief opinion. I personally believe that image and perception is just as important as the reality of the game, because if it only takes one person to walk by that has some connections to some sort of media or something like that, to walk past the game and think, wow, what's going on here? Look at these all in their full tracksuits playing together. And I believe in not just the tops and t-shirts, I believe trousers as well. If you look at any sport in the world, it's not played in jeans and a shirt, well, rare, and your teammate is wearing something else. It's always complete uniform. And I think that's so important to put across to people that want to maybe get involved with our sport commercially. So that's just my view on it anyway.
No, I think you're right. I mean, my point is it depends on the level that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
That's cool. Right then, next question. This is straight to you actually. During your years on the Pétanque England board, what is the one thing you'd love to change if it was just made without the need for votes? So something you'd like to either put forward or something you'd like to take out?
I don't know. I think difficult question, that, isn't it? I think maybe one of the areas where we could do a lot better actually is in relation to raising money for the game actually, and maybe it's not easy because we are a minority sport, you know. Where people have been successful at it is where they've had a local connection. Yeah, and they've been able to bring that connection to a club or maybe to a region, you know, in a much more micro level. When you try and do it nationally, it becomes more complicated. But
yeah,
if there's one thing I could change, I suppose, is maybe I would look, you know, maybe we could have had some people who are a little bit more skilled at that, maybe involved at the top level, who are prepared to put the time in to do it. It's hard work, mate, you know, and it's not easy, but we've got to get a culture more of raising money, mate. There's no doubt about it, because if we don't, we're going to struggle. There's so many things that we want to do, and unfortunately money is what's required to do it a lot of the time. Not always, because you know from work that you do, you can do a lot of things that don't involve money to promote the game. Yeah, you know. So
okay,
that is something. If I look back, I think to myself, you know, maybe we could have done better. We could have done better at that, and we could do better at that actually. But what it really needs is someone to really take ownership of it. You know, that's the point.
Yeah, no, I get that. So that it brings me on to my next question, really, and that's what have Pétanque England done or are going to do to promote the sport, to basically find sponsors and have more money in the pot? Is there an action plan in place? Well,
I mean, what's happened as part of that budget process is, although we've arrived at a balanced budget, right, where we're going to get wriggle room in the future is by going out actively and looking for sponsorship. We haven't talked about it too much, but there is, you know, there is a sports development group that we've now formed within the board, and there are people involved in that. And what I'm hoping will come out of that is not only, you know, promotional profile raising type activity coming out of that, but looking at really active ways in which we can identify sponsors and see if we can get them on board and sign up to, you know, longer term programs. Maybe if we could find a sponsor for a couple of years that would be prepared to cover certain things, that would be ideal. I think we do need to spend a lot more time and think about that a lot more, though, Hoff. I think it is a weakness in the organisation at the moment that we should all recognise, own up to, and see if we can find a way of solving.
But some of what you said a few minutes ago, which is having the right people doing the right jobs. Now, there's 2,500 members, I guess, roughly, or whatever it is. Surely there's someone in there that's line of work, or is it within marketing or within promotion? Can you not tap into them and get them on board and see what, or get advice from them?
I think the thing is that, you know, we have on many occasions sort of signalled, I think, that we're looking for people to help us in these areas, and sometimes we've had some offers, but we haven't been exactly inundated, mate.
No,
you know?
no, I can imagine.
And I think that there are people out there, you know, with those skills that can do that. But I think what would be better if there was a group of people sharing the workload, because there's nothing more lonelier than trying to do this on your own, this kind of work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do agree with that. No, okay. Well, no, thanks for that, Martin. That's good to hear. Anyway, so moving on then. so this is another question someone sent in. Do you believe the club level player should have to pay a license fee when in all reality they don't get anything substantial from the license at all? Can you tell me what they do get and why having a license is important?
Okay. Well, I think the important thing to understand about our organisation right from the beginning is that it's not just, PE is not the board, is it?
No.
PE reflects clubs, it reflects leagues, it reflects regions, and then we're all part of what I would say is the ball family, really, and we all need to think about how we fit into that. Okay, now there are a lot of people who are PE members who work very hard to make sure that club members, grassroots members, enjoy the sport and are able to benefit from that. So we need to think about PE as an entity and not an us and them sort of situation. The other thing is I want to reiterate is that, as I said earlier on, I only got involved in this sport through the grassroots. The grassroots is critical.
Absolutely.
When I look at players now, right, who are at the top of the sport, these are players that I met for the very first time playing some league match in Chiltern, maybe, 20 years ago. This is where they came from. We cannot succeed if we don't sort of support the grassroots. Now, there's some things and initiatives coming on board to try and help and improve the grassroots even more. There's a revolving club loan idea that's just been promoted by our president, for example, whereby clubs can basically get interest-free loan to try and invest and improve in their facilities. There's that side of thing. There's coaching. We have developed a lot of coaching, and at grassroots level, club members can benefit from that, but they need to actually signal to us that they want that to happen. Club members also benefit, obviously, from our insurance cover and our insurance scheme to make sure that they're covered from that if anything happens to them when they're playing the sport. So there's a number of benefits of being involved as a club member, but at the end of the day, people need to look at it and decide whether they want to be part of the family or not. In the round, if you go on our website, there's a list of benefits for being a member of Pétanque England. Look through those benefits, add them up, and work out in your own mind whether what is it at the end of the day, less than 50p a week is worth it.
Yeah,
it's not an expensive sport. It's not an expensive sport to get involved in, is it? What's the most expensive thing? What's the most expensive thing in our sport? The most expensive thing in our sport depends what level you play at, but probably the purchase of your ball, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, that's cool. I'm sure people listening will benefit from that answer anyway, because I know for a fact from myself asking that question, I was looking forward to seeing what you were going to say, because as someone who playing at the top level, well, I think I'm playing at the top level.
You are playing at the top level, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what they do get out of it, because even when I was a youngster playing just club pétanque, I didn't think about it because I was quite ambitious. So I suppose ambition is part of it as well.
Well, what they get out of membership is that the PE club that they're a member is part of PE, right?
Yeah,
that's supporting
absolutely.
them. That's supporting everybody to enjoy the game. But I will go back to what I said earlier, right? We need to make this distinction between what's in it for me and what's in it for the sport.
Yeah,
I think people need to think about both sides of that equation. I do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, staying on licensing anyway, the next question is, do you think tiered licensing in England would help our game? If so, why? If not, why not?
It's being looked at the moment by the board, Hoff, yeah.
I have a big thing about this. I think it's. I'm not going to go into it now, but I think it's worth it.
Well, why don't you, mate? I'm interested to hear what you got to say.
Well, it's still a lot I need to talk about, but I just personally think that one thing that I seem to see a lot of in the calendar is people talking about clashes. Oh, we can't clash with that. Can't clash. So if you had a tiered system and you pay for what you want to get out of the sport or what you want to get into the sport for, whether that's to play for England or just play regional level or just play for my club, you can have clashes all over and you can make the sport more leveled out. So for short argument, you could have it. So just say you have 3 tiers. You have gold, silver, bronze. Everyone can play in a national event, because at the end of the day, you have proper national titles. So you have 4 a year, say mixed doubles, singles, doubles, triples. Anyone can enter them. Interregionals, anyone can enter them. Gold are the people that want to play for England and represent their country. So they have a calendar fit for them. The next level is say silver is for regional players, and they have a calendar fit for them. The bottom level, bronze, they pay their fee and they have a calendar fit for them. And then you can have rankings in each section as well. So even if you're a club level player, you still have that competitiveness to go and travel and try and become the best in your area, your level sort of thing. And this and I think it's also a good way of making more money, because I know for a fact I would happily pay over £100 if it was tiered licensing, if I knew that I was having a calendar structured for me to become my best player and to make it to international representation. And I just think it'd be a really good idea. I mean, I've written things out and it's difficult to talk about it off the cuff, but I know where I want to go with it. But I just think it's a really good idea personally. But some people don't.
I think a lot of sports have it, don't they? You know,
well, look at golf. You have PGA Tour, European Tour, amateur sport, amateur license. It's rife in every sport, and there's nothing wrong with not imitating, but looking at other sports model and going down that route.
I think the only thing I would say about tiered membership in the way that you've described it, right? I think I'm not sure we know enough about what people want out of those particular tiers, right? That's one of the sort of questions in my mind, particularly if we talk about grassroots level. You may recall last year we did this biggest ever survey of our members, and we had a really great response, and it was, I won't bore you with the statistics, but I'm very confident that was very representative of our membership. And the problem often we have when we're talking about our sport is that people say, well, our members think this, right? And they're not really got much backing them up to demonstrate that, apart from maybe 5 or 6 comments on social media or something. That survey was very interesting, but one of the questions that I regret that we didn't ask was this question, how often do you actually travel out of your immediate local area to play pétanque? Because I'm not convinced at grassroots level that there's much demand to do that. I think at grassroots level, the primary motivation, I mean, people who are listening to this or who play at grassroots level can tell me otherwise, but I suspect that the main motivation is to play in the club or to play in the local league.
Yeah.
So even if you set up what you're saying is a program of events for that level, say you did that and you say, right, we'll hold that in Nottingham or we'll hold that in Gravesend or somewhere. Would it naturally appeal for people to travel those distances to go and play in that? Is that what they really want from us? Do you know what I mean? So it's about making sure that if you're going to do it and you're going to construct what is a different offer for different levels, in these tiers, that the people that are in those tiers actually want what you're offering them. Do you see my point?
Yeah. Like I said, I can always send you over what I've written out and you can have a look. But other people that I've sent it to, who I play with, have said it's a really good idea. But obviously, we're looking at it from a top levels perspective, obviously. So.
Well, I mean, you have to look at it at all levels, don't you? Because that's the whole point of it. What you're doing is you're coming up with something that is closely aligned to the needs and the interests and the motivations of the people in those different tiers, right? Yeah. That's what you're about, And what I'm saying is I'm not quite sure. I think I understand what guys like you who operate at in the let's face it, the top tier of pétanque in this country. I think I know right now what you'd like to do, but I'm not sure what appeals to other people. For example, if you held our national titles at the moment is open to everybody, right? Would you actually have different national titles going on, for example? Would you do that?
No, because I feel like a national event should be open to everyone anyway, because it is the national event. So it doesn't matter what tier you're in, what level you're in, you can go and compete. Because also that opens up inspiration for club players who feel like, do you know what, next year I might get the next tier up, but I'm going to see just where I am at by playing in the next national event. I just think inspiration.
we talked earlier about, you know, my so-called journey, but, you know, I didn't think for many years, I never thought about playing outside of my local area because, you know, in Chiltern we're lucky, you know, like other regions, we've got a great league set up, and you could really enjoy yourself just playing at league level. You know, that was good enough for me for a long time, you know, and I'm sure that's good enough for a lot of people. They're very happy and get a lot out of the sport just playing at that level, you know. And I would never, I still play grassroots. I play for I'll play for a club that I've been, you know, involved with for over 20 years. You know, I play with players that never go out of their local area. You know,
right?
It's,
absolutely.
You know, it's an enjoyable thing to do.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. But okay, we'll leave that there. We'll let people have their opinions on it if they want to in the comments. So moving away from licensing, the next question was, do you believe the game in England is moving upwardly in terms of talent and ability compared to other nations?
That's an interesting question, Hoff, right? It's an interesting question because one of the things I would say in immediate response to that is that other nations are continually improving and not standing still. You know, so at any given point, if you maybe asked me that question a couple of years ago, I might have had a different response to it than I do now, because I do see nations that maybe in the past weren't particularly competitive, say at European level. I mean, I'll give you an example. Slovenia, for example. Yeah. That's a country that I never used to even notice at international level. I've seen them play on many occasions now, and I can see they've raised their game significantly. And it's very tough for us because we have to keep moving alongside in response to our competition. I do see some very good signs. I mean, it's a question of how you measure it, right? Do you measure it by looking at us and seeing our players competing against some of the best in the world and doing quite well? Maybe not winning, but doing quite well. I mean, if you go back, say, to the last singles, doubles, mixed doubles, right? You know, take someone like Monty Quire, for example. You know, he took 10 points off the guy that won the championship in a singles match. He lost the game. Is that progress? Is that progress? I mean, what I've always looked for when I look at our teams playing abroad is that they don't look out of place. They look like they can take people on. They look like they've got a chance of winning. They look like they could win if they get their act together at a particular point. If we're looking at medals, right? If we're looking realistically at what we've achieved since I've been on the board, right? If I look back at it, you know, we won medals in the female espoirs, proper medal. I'm not talking about the Nations Cup. I'm talking about the actual championship. Yeah, we've won obviously a gold at espoirs level in shooting. Okay. Last year we got a bronze medal in espoirs for our men. Okay, we achieved that. If you look at our men, I have to say we've not actually got into the top stages of a competition for too long. We need to be aiming higher and progressing further, because we just, you know, the last time I think we properly got into a top 16 of a major championship was the first world championship that I ever went to, and that was in 2010. That's 10 years ago. Okay, our women, you know, they've been doing some good stuff. I mean, let's face it, last time, you know, in China, that time of the world championships, we came ninth in the world. We've got women that have won medals at European and, well, Sarah Huntley, basically, at world championship and European level. These are all good advances. Last time in the women's world doubles, when we went to Spain, you know, Sammy Thatcher and Emma Longstaff, they were literally a couple of points away from getting a medal, which we'd never achieved before at world level in that format. So there are signs of progress. That the harder stuff, I'd say the harder categories are our men and our youth, because these are the very, very tough categories. I'd like to think that we can progress, but we've got to work bloody hard at it if we're going to progress.
Yeah,
really
it's
hard,
dedicated, isn't it? A lot of dedication and commitment.
Yeah.
Which obviously isn't always easy to do when people have got families and stuff, but something we got to look at.
Well, I mean, this raises a sort of a wider question about how are we going to progress? Because, you know, no sport, amateur or otherwise, no one progresses unless they put the pitch time in and the hard, miles training to actually improve that. I mean, when I was a kid, I was, pretty good at golf. I was pretty good at cricket, but I used to spend hours on a golf course, and I used to spend hours on a practice range. And I used to, in cricket, a bit like you, I think, when you were involved in football, you know what it's like. You got to put a lot of time into it to improve. So I think the way that we improve. The one thing I've been saying for a while, and I think don't know whether people agree with me or not, but I felt that I'm not sure we're going to improve too much more from playing domestically. Yeah, we improve by playing people that are better than us internationally, and that's where we were going. And with our men's squad in particular, and when that bloody virus dropped on us, it was just about a year ago now that the squad had gone off for its first sort of international outing when we went to Holland. And you may recall that we won that tournament. There were some very good players there. There were national and international Dutch players at that tournament, and we managed to prevail. And that was a real boost for me. I got a real buzz out of that. I know the guys did, the whole squad did, because we'd gone out there and shown what we can do.
Yeah.
When you go into an environment that is tough and you improve, that is fantastic. The other thing I would say is, look at Baldock Town. Look at what's been achieved in the Euro Cup. Look at the progress that's been made there. I mean, I've been on Baldock's journey when they first started doing that, and look at what I've seen them move forward. And now look what was achieved last time to actually get to the top, the real top amongst clubs in Europe. That's a fantastic achievement. We should not underestimate how hard that is to do that. It's tough. That you've played in it. These are all signs of progress, Hoff, right?
Yeah.
But we're tempering against progress. We're tempering against that the amount of money that people have to invest in themselves to improve, the time that it involves, the loss of holidays, the telling your girlfriend or your boyfriend that, sorry, I'm not going to be around this weekend, or your family, or your children. We're trying to balance that against knowing that it's very competitive out there, and we've got to try and put more into it to improve. But I do think that whilst we will, and it's important to compete domestically, and we will improve competing at the top level domestically, we're only really going to get into that further stage if we compete internationally.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The better players you play, the more you have to improve. So that is very true. Next question then, because you mentioned the squad just now. I think this is something a lot of people want to know, especially those in the squads. What will be happening to the men's, ladies, or whatever other squads there were from that year in 2019 that was abruptly stopped in 2020? Will they be continuing, or is it a clean slate? Or
okay, well, the reality is
are you allowed to say?
Yeah, of course I am. Yeah. It's no secret. Let's just deal with the men's squad first. That was a squad that qualified quite properly and rightly for the World Championships. Okay, those World Championships last July were postponed to this forthcoming July. So therefore, that squad is the one that will form the basis of the team that we will select for that World Championship. I don't think anybody, unless I'm mistaken, disagrees with that as an outcome, because that's right and proper, I think, in terms of that. What I'm worried about, though, as you can imagine, is that what I was just saying earlier in that previous discussion is we're already in January. We're 6 months away from this. We're not even sure when we can start playing again. I am concerned about preparation for that.
Yeah.
That is a big issue for us. And where we were going with that, a year ago, was we'd gone on that first trip to Holland, and we were preparing that men's squad through a series of other opportunities that we were going to put in place to prepare for that World Championship, to be competitive. Now, everybody else ain't playing either, so you could argue they're on a level playing field, but that does concern me to a degree. I am actually catching up with our men's squad this Friday on a Zoom call, because we need to discuss about July and what we can do. At the moment, that is on, but there's no guarantee that it will be on. At the moment, it's on, but there's no guarantees on that. With regard to the women's squad, that was really the squad that was being prepared for the Women's European Championships, which are actually not taking place this year. They didn't take place last year, and they're not taking place this year. Okay, so what we're proposing to do with the women is to start things afresh on that, because the World Championships, as you probably know, are going to take place the end of November, beginning of December. So we feel we've got enough time to start afresh with that, and go through the rankings process to find the squad that we will then take the team from for that. So that's where we're at with that. With regard to the men as well, don't forget though that we've still got the European Championships as well in September. So the new round of rankings will basically seek to find that squad for that as well. But again, I can't give any certainty that even that's going to take place in September. I certainly hope it will do. Yeah. It's in France. We hope that it will do, Hoff, but we are reliant on the way things go with this virus.
Fingers crossed then. So staying on with that, what is the actual format for the rankings this year? How is it being done? Because we've seen that there's 3 triples, 2 doubles, 1 singles. Is there any change in the format of how you get selected for the Euros?
The way things are at the moment is that we're still moving on the concept of finding the top 6 players, okay, from the rankings to form the squad. What we've been looking at, and I think I referred to this earlier, is we're looking at the calendar at the moment, okay, and we might have to take some decisions about changing the number of competitions that we can realistically organise in time, because it will be counterproductive, mate, if we filled up the calendar to a large extent and not giving ourselves some space also to prepare for those European Championships. So I can't really give a precise answer on that at the moment, because that's still a little bit up in the air, to be honest. But one thing I will say to you is, as soon as we've arrived at an outcome on that, I will let everybody know how we're going to approach that. It's very important that we try and do our best to make that as competitive and as fair and as open as possible. That's the most important thing. Clearly, what I said earlier about tiers being in place, if that prevents people competing, it's going to cause real issues.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. We'll look forward to seeing what the outcome is of that. So what is the MPP and who is in it, and what type of decisions do you make? Okay, well, the MPP at the moment has just been, actually, I just seen an email earlier today, because we've just sort of changed the membership a bit, but essentially it involves people that are either lead members for the various ages and genders. Yeah. It also involves coaches, some of our coaches as well. And I mean, I could run through the names, but we have a group of about, I think, 7 or 8 people that are involved in that. What we tend to do, and what we've been doing of late, is we've been meeting on sort of ad hoc sort of issues to discuss them as we go along. We always have an annual review. That annual review at the end of the year is to look at how we've performed in the various European and World Championships, what we've learned from that, the successes and the failures. And part of that exercise, we haven't actually obviously done that since the end of 2019, where we had a day-long session to actually run through that in detail, where we looked at it. Occasionally, as has happened in the past, there has been discussions within that group about selecting a team, but generally we look to the lead members to recommend what those selections should be for the various age and gender categories, and okay. that's how it operates. I think it could operate better. The one thing I will say is, when I first joined the board over 5 years ago, I remember the late great Lee Jameson standing up AGM after AGM and asking this simple question: who's actually in charge of playing on the board? We didn't have anybody. I'm not saying
that we've got a perfect sort of scenario now, but at least we have a structure where there is some thinking and people responsible for our playing, you know, both domestically and internationally. And, you know, we do have that structure. I'm not saying that structure is perfect. I think we can improve on it further. I'm actually not that opposed to involving more people in it, because there are members of the MPP who aren't members of the board, for example.
Okay.
What I don't like, Hoff, as you can imagine, is I don't like involving people who are also competitors in our tournaments, because, you know, I'm not accusing people of self-interest, but let's just say that it's better that they're not involved.
Okay,
That's
fair enough.
You know, that doesn't stop people giving their views. I mean, I think people should give their views all the time. If they think that something should change, if they think that there's something we can improve upon, people should never be shy of telling us that. You know, constructive criticism is what makes PE go round, you know.
Yeah.
No one's, I mean, I don't believe anybody, myself, any member of the board, or even the board as a whole, has got a monopoly of wisdom.
No.
People come up with ideas all the time. You do, you know. I meet people regularly in the sport that have got great ideas. You know, let's talk about them. No one's being told that their ideas are not worth considering. Put them out there. Tell us what they are. We'll look at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, that's something that people watching this can do. They can write in the comments if they've got any ideas, and I'm sure you can reply back to them. Okay, so we're coming to the end now. We'll do a couple more questions and then we'll leave it there. The next question is, this is something that was brought up on Facebook recently. What's your views on the growing debate regarding the levels of player in the game, more specifically the so-called elitism or elite player?
Every sport is a pyramid, right? You know, it goes up, and as you go up the pyramid, there's less people involved, right? That's a natural sort of process in any sport. There's a difference between calling someone elite and maybe an attitude which is called elitism. Yeah. Because you know, if you are an elite player, you have to earn that, right? You have to be a role model. You have to be someone who, by the way you conduct yourself, people look up to and say, that's someone that I want to, you know, emulate. That's someone who's given a lot to the game. Maybe I think part of the problem here is one of perception, because I'll tell you something, right? Players that I consider to be in the elite, you know, they give a lot to the sport. They actually, you know, I look at players at the top of that pyramid that I've been talking about. They give a lot of time to developing our young players, for example. I can think loads of examples of that. You know, people like yourself who are looking to promote the sport and doing other things, organising competitions, whatever. This is all give back to the sport. You know, of course, you know, you can always, you know, sometimes, you know, people might say things, or they might be a little bit immodest or something. I don't know. You know, I don't see it much in our sport, to be honest. I don't.
No, I agree with that.
You know, and, you know, there's a difference between saying that someone is elite and someone is being elitist. And you know, and looking down their noses at people, which no one should ever do. And I don't think people do in our sport, to be honest. You know, many a time, as I said, I see our top players giving their time and their energy, their thoughts, their advice to other players, whatever level they're at.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And also, I think like you said earlier, it is a lot of it is perception rather than reality, because us, and I don't like to talk about myself on these podcasts, but obviously as one of the top players amongst another, you know, a numerous amount, say 20, 25 of us, we do travel a lot and spend a lot of money playing in all these tournaments, whether it's on home soil or abroad. And we spend a lot of time together. So maybe people see us all together, laughing, joking, competing, and they think, look at them, they're all together. They all think they're better than everyone else. Where really, if any player come up to me and said, Dave, do you mind helping me with this? Or do you mind playing with me in this tournament? I would have so much time for them. I have no, I'm not disrespectful in any manner of any player that is, say, for short argument, less of me, because I don't see it like that. I just see that I'm ambitious and that I want to compete for England and at the top level, and I'll do all I can to get there.
I think the reality is, right, is maybe what it is, right, is a feeling that's a bit cliquey. All right, it's a bit cliquey. The reality is, though, is that we're involved in a team sport here, you know, and those at the top of it, if they've got a team ethos and a team spirit, and they are together, a bit like what's been achieved in Baldock Town, you know, I can see it, you know, developing in our men's squad until this bloody COVID come along. That sort of spirit of togetherness is so important in sport to actually succeed. And that's why, you know, friendships form. People, you know, they're in each other's pockets, they're playing together, they're socialising together. That's naturally going to happen. But do not mistake that for someone then thinking that they're not interested in other players or they look down on other players, because the players I know do not do that. They do not do that. I don't have a problem with using the term elite to players that have earned it, Hoff. I don't.
Yeah.
I really don't. Because, you know, if you're a role model and you've worked bloody hard to get to the top of the sport, why shouldn't I call you elite?
And if you're getting a President's Medal as well, eh?
Well, that's a great initiative, that, by the way, by Clive.
I agree with that. Yeah.
You know, I mean, you look at, looking at the people that have been sort of recognised. You know, you know, look at what the guys have been doing up at Leicester. There, we're raising all that money to develop that club on that, you know, former bowling club, Bowling Green. You know, this is fantastic work. You know, people need to be recognised for stuff like that. Yeah. But more importantly, people need to look at it and think, right, I can do that as well.
Yeah,
we can learn from it. You know, and I think Clive's come up with a good idea there. You know, you have to be careful sometimes, because sometimes when you give out awards like that, inadvertently, often you forget people, or you gloss over people that have actually done as much as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
We don't want to offend people because they've been missed out, but I'm sure Clive's got that in mind when he's thinking about who he should give those medals to in future. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thanks for that, Martin. Anyway, on the topic of elite player, maybe people will have something to say about what you said, but I don't disagree with what you said, to be honest. So last question then, and this is something that I think a lot of people have wanted your views on, and you have given them in the past, but maybe they want to see it, your face talking about it, is why do you believe in selection?
Well, I didn't hear that, mate. You just cut out there.
Okay. Do you believe in selection? Like, why do you believe in selection in the game?
Okay. Let's talk about selection, right? Whatever system we use, selection exists. Okay. If you go back to the old ways we used to do it, where basically we used to hold a triples competition, because that was basically what we were trying to find, a triples team.
Don't
because the only game. No. I'm not going to mention you. Right? I'm thinking about, generally, I don't tend to mention players or my views on players, because it's not the way I usually go about things, or ever go about things. But let's just go back to that process that we had, right, where it was like a winner takes all, and if you won, you were the team that went to that tournament, right? That involves selection. It involved the selection of players making that selection. Okay, so that's what happened with that. And then we had an additional problem, because when we used to do it, that selection also involved teams of 4. Okay, and we found often, didn't we, that there was maybe 75% of the time 3 players were playing, and 25% of the time that other player was playing. Okay, there's a problem with that as well. You know, that form of selection is a form of self-selection. Okay, I think the problem I had with it, in terms of encouraging people, was that those selections were also products of friendships. We talked about cliques earlier. You know, they were products of people that were playing in the same club or in the same region. It became a bit tribal, some of those selections. And I personally felt that it was limiting the opportunity, because if you weren't in a magic triple, yeah, maybe in the top 3 or 4, your chances of actually succeeding were not fantastic. So what did we do? We said, right, well, let's move away from that. And part of the reason for moving away from that was that we also needed to find, people that were good at singles and doubles as well, right, apart from triples. And let's actually spread it out into a bigger test. One of the things that always amazed me about playing for England in those days was that I was actually put through a greater test trying to represent my region at Hayling Island, or at Breen as it was before, than players were representing our country. I was playing maybe 25 to 30 games to represent my region in a round robin, whereas we had a system where you didn't even need to turn up to 3 rounds because there were so few teams competing. You could literally turn up maybe in 2 rounds, and then in that 1 round that you turned up, you just qualified for a top 8, and then we found a team out of that. Yeah. So I have always been a great believer in the in the rankings and testing everybody across the disciplines. Not only that, but showing how people are consistent. And I have to say, I mean, if you look back at the rankings tables that we've had, and I look back and I think back about how well those players were playing at the time, I genuinely believe that those rankings came up with the best players that were around, both for men and women at that time. Okay. We then get into a further point about selection. Let's go beyond that. The selection issue, I've got to say, if everybody looks at it, right, and I think back to the debates that we had and maybe some of the controversies that we had, it didn't really revolve around the selection of the teams that were playing in the triples competitions. I think generally the teams that emerged from the rankings that were given the opportunity to represent their country were ones that, if you'd done probably a survey of 200 people that knew these players, they would have probably said that was the right selection. Where we got into controversy, and I don't really, you know me, I'm not a great fan of, looking back, into the past. It's important to look at the past to learn from, what you can from the past, but there's no future in the past, as I've said on many occasions. But what really created the controversy was when we were trying to find singles and doubles representatives and who should have got that. So the debate revolved around, should it be those that back in the summer previously, bearing in mind this was a tournament in the spring of the following year, should they be the ones that should naturally represent, the country? And then you have to think about another problem with that competition, which is this. You're finding you've got to select players to play singles, and at the same time, the mixed doubles is taking place. These are not separate competitions. So you've got to think about the combination, about how that works. And then there's another sort of question that related to that, which I wrestled with a great deal at the time, which is, what's more important? Is it the all-round player that's at the top of the rankings, or is it the player that's actually amassed the greatest number of ranking points in the singles, particularly in the singles, or indeed in the doubles? So it was a very difficult decision. I might add, by the way, that was one of the decisions when we were talking about NPP earlier, where the whole of the NPP considered it. Yeah, that decision was not made by any individual. It was a debate. It was a difficult discussion. I remember the meeting taking place. There was 7 or 8 of us discussing it. We went through it to our best ability to decide how to make that decision. I understand why people were disappointed at the outcome of that. And I also would say to them, as I said at the time, because I spent at least a couple of hours with players individually that weren't successful at that time, explaining why that decision was made, that it was a fine margin decision. So to conclude on this question of selection, selection's always taken place in our game, okay? The actual controversial selection issues, I would say, has only really arisen on one occasion, actually, since we've had it. Yeah. How we address that in the future, we need to learn a bit more. But going forward, we've got the squad system, and really what we should be doing with that is working within that squad and trying to make the best decision closest to the tournament that we're actually going to be competing in about who should get the nod to play. Because one of the problems I have with the old system was that you were like qualifying like the summer before, to often play for something that was 15 or 18 months away.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. You know, it might have worked if everybody had adopted a squad type mentality and worked through a program. I think that's another regret, maybe that question earlier about what we could have done better. Maybe we could have raised our game in getting people prepared for these tournaments better in the past.
Yeah.
You know, I really do believe that. But, you know, it comes back to what you said earlier about time, money, you know, family commitments and everything else. You can't force people. You can't hold an axe over people's head. You've got to work together collectively to come up with a solution that's going to lead to the best success. I believe that very strongly, Hoff. And I think if we all work together at it, we're going to start improving, mate. I do believe it. I'm very ambitious for our players. And I actually, when I look at it, I think we've got a very good group of people, quite a lot actually, that could succeed at it if they put their mind to it.
Okay, cool. Well, Martin, if you're happy, we will leave that there. We've gone over time a little bit, but I think it was enjoyable. I think the members will enjoy listening to what you've had to say through those questions. I really appreciate you coming on. And yeah, so thank you for coming on, and we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, right. Okay, Hoff. All the best, cheers, mate. Stay safe.
Bye, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.